This is Fave podcast episode 17. And each episode, we interview a friend or family member and talk about their background and get some thoughts on the Fave 5 topics. And today, I'm pleased to be joined by my high school classmate, Arnold Kling. Arnold and I both graduated from Clayton High School in Clayton, Missouri in 1971. Arnold, welcome to the Fave 5 podcast.
I'm looking forward to it.
So the time that I met Arnold, I can remember quite clearly, was the first day of school, 1970. I had just transferred into Clayton High School from Tenafly, New Jersey, and I had actually spent 1 year before in Clayton in the fifth grade. So I actually spent the fifth and the 12th grades in Clayton. And in the fifth grade, I had made a few friends. And on the first day of high school, I had run into one of them in the hallway. That was John Landau. And so I stopped him and said that I was now here again as a senior. And I asked him about how I could get involved in activities in the high school. I had been afraid that coming in as a senior, I would miss out on all the opportunities that I had worked hard to achieve back in New Jersey, namely being a sports editor of the newspaper and being the basketball statistician and other roles that I had worked hard to get in New Jersey. I thought I wouldn't be able to get them because they'd already be occupied in Clayton. So I asked John about that, and he said, "Well, just a moment." And then at that moment, Arnold was walking by in the hallway, and he stopped him and he said, "Arnold, this guy here wants to work on the newspaper." And Arnold was the co-editor of the Clayton newspaper, which was called Claymo. And he stopped and he said to me, "Give me a name, give me a name." And told him my name, and he said, "All right, you can be on the newspaper." And I thought, well, that was easy. I didn't expect it. I thought I'd get some story like, "No, I'm sorry, we have all of our positions filled." So, at any rate, that was the beginning of our relationship, and we became friends. And we'll talk a little bit more later when I tell some stories about where that led to. But does that sound about accurate? Do you remember that
I actually
incident?
don't remember that one incident, but it does
Okay.
sound like me.
All right. All right. Well, then we did start to work together on the newspaper, and that was a good start for me. So, Arnold, we're going to start out by talking a little bit about your background. When and where were you born?
Okay, born in 1954 in St. Louis, Missouri, actually in the city, but my first memory is uh, living on this in this stone building, which I think still exists. Just looked at it this weekend on Google Earth or whatever, and it was the street didn't have a name at that point. It was just a gravel road. It's in a part of University City that I'll bet you have never been to. I'll bet that no one from Clayton has ever been to. It it became a kind of a poor, almost all black neighborhood. It wasn't that when I was there. If I can inflict a little sociology on people, um, St. Louis housing patterns in the 1950s and 60s could accurately be described as systemic racism. The whole reason that the city and the St. Louis County are separate and shaped the way they are, with the county surrounding the city, uh, was because white people didn't want to live near black people. So when I was in this elementary school, University Forest, there were no black kids in the school. We always lived in apartments, and we had a sabbatical. My father had a sabbatical in sixth grade, so I was away. And then when we came back, friends of my mother said Arnold should go to a really good school. And so they had us move to Clayton. Meanwhile, that neighborhood near what was Partridge and Canton Avenue, there'd been a diaspora, and uh, no one else moved to Clayton. I guess because they couldn't sell their houses and then afford anything in Clayton. So they went to places like Parkway mostly. Um, but anyway, that I loved that through fifth grade. In fact, I instigated a Zoom reunion just of my elementary school. And and we had great fun talking about those old times. Uh, but anyway, so after fifth grade, moved to Princeton, and then moved to Clayton in seventh grade, and was immediately put into double English because they were so proud of their French program. So I wasn't in any advanced type classes, which was sort of I didn't acquire friends in any great extent until about 11th grade. I think Tim Poor, who obviously you know was like my only friend through for about the first 3 years there.
So you say when you moved in, the Clayton schools didn't consider your background adequate and they didn't put
Oh
you in
no,
honors
no, of
classes?
course not. No. I had moved from Princeton, New Jersey, which was, probably a slum in their minds or something.
What is your ancestry?
Um, so my both my parents were European, ultimately European Jews, and yeah, my father was a very depression influenced guy because his own father went bankrupt during the Depression. Um, my mother was from a small town called Bradford, Pennsylvania, back when there was a steel country in Pennsylvania. I think they were just small merchants there.
Do you know what countries in Europe your
But
grandparents are
my father used to always say that it was on the border between Russia and Poland, and sometimes one owned it and sometimes the other did. And I think my mother was similarly, there was a Pale of Settlement background. Uh, this is an odd point. Her maiden name is Yazgur, and the Yazgur name may be familiar with, from a song. Uh,
from
and
Woodstock?
that was, in fact, a relative of hers, a distant cousin who had the farm.
So, in addition to the places you mentioned, where else have you lived since you left St. Louis?
Not many really. Let's see. I lived in the DC area and I went to grad school in Boston.
And where are you living now?
In Silver Spring, Maryland, not far from where your son was located. Is he
That's
still
right.
around?
He has recently moved to Baltimore, but he lived in Silver Spring for quite a few years.
Okay.
Who was in your family when you were growing up?
Not many. Um, the my father and mother had this RH incompatibility, which nowadays means nothing. A woman just gets a ROGAM shot after the first child, but then it precluded having other children. So um, so we had no other relatives in St. Louis. I always say that there was no other Kling that I'm related to because that's a name that my father acquired when he immigrated, and so there wasn't much family around.
Did you have family somewhere else? You mentioned the Asgers. Were they part of your
Yeah,
extended
so
family?
my mother had several brothers and sisters, and they were scattered mostly in closer to the Pennsylvania area where they were from. And then my father had a sister who was a- kind of the darling of her parents and who was very bright, but became an ardent communist and so never had a very uh, successful life. And they lived in Chicago.
What did your parents do?
Well, my father was, as you probably remember, was a professor at Washington U, and he was a classic academic, unlike me. I mean, he smoked a pipe, he would wear a vest, sweater vest. He very comfortable around academics, very uncomfortable in almost any other situation. Terrified of home maintenance, which was one of the reasons we never had a house. I remember my mother sitting at the kitchen table crying, saying, "I want a home," and he would couldn't deal with it. Didn't like home maintenance. Wasn't really a good person to converse with children. I noticed that finally when I had my own children, and he just couldn't talk to a 6-year-old. So I think he was very lucky to have me. I was uh, kind of cognitively developed very quickly, socially didn't develop at all. Was behind really until well into my 20s, socially.
And
Uh,
about your mom, what did she do?
and she, so um, my dad met my mom actually through his sister because my mom was worked as a secretary for the local Communist Party, and was a communist. My dad quickly talked her out of that, and um, she worked for a while as a secretary for something called the Psychoanalytic Institute in St. Louis. She
And your
had a
dad
degree
was a
in
professor of,
journalism, but in those days, women just didn't automatically go into their profession, and but that's something I'm sure she could have done.
so your dad taught political science at Washington U, and then later he was a provost. Is that not right?
Yeah, yeah, he became dean, then he became provost, and seemed to be very well regarded as an administrator there. And those were the tough days of, you have the students demonstrating on the other hand, one hand, and on the other hand, the local business people were very, very conservative. So uh, balancing those two constituencies was hard.
Did he still teach when he became administrator?
No, he left teaching.
Did he miss that, or how did he view the two roles, the teaching and the being a dean or a provost?
I think he really enjoyed teaching, and
Hmm.
his students really enjoyed him. I think several of his students gave large amounts of money later, and he would teach unusual courses. He taught a course called Politics and the Novel, where he would use fiction to illustrate political points.
Did he have a political philosophy that ran through his teaching?
Um, I, Well, he was known, he had the three iron laws of social science. The first one is sometimes it's this way and sometimes it's that way. The second was the data are insufficient and wait, um, I'm losing the third one. I'll get it. But um, oh, the methodology is flawed. That's the third iron law. Um, I think he felt at the time that because he was not mathematical or statistical, that he was going to be passed by. And in fact, Washington U had one of the most mathematical political science departments, so he was keenly aware of that. I think nowadays the older, more verbal theory orientation has come back, and so I think he'd be surprised at that. But that was part of his reason for preferring administration, feeling like, the discipline had passed him by.
Hmm. When you were in school, what did you like to do?
Handstands. I was a very weird kid. You just have no idea what a weird kid I was. So at age 4, I was already in second grade because at the end of kindergarten, they promoted me to first grade and then they moved me on to second. Uh, I I don't know if this is people would probably say this is an on the spectrum characterization, but I don't go for that. But I did have a tendency to get obsessed with doing things and doing specific things, like just doing handstands all the time. I won every handstand contest in elementary school. Um, and like when I was in middle school, I would play Strat-O-Matic baseball with myself for hours and hours. I remember my mother's Xerox 500 copies of score sheets, and I think I went through almost all of them. So I would just become fixated on things. Uh, Somebody told me that I had a weird way of standing, kind of with leaning in one direction and bouncing my foot a lot. So I was just a very strange kid. Had no idea that I was as strange as I was until later.
How did you get into what led to being the newspaper editor?
That was uh, that was the best thing that happened to me in high school because I mean I was still coming out of the double English kind of phenomenon, plus being a very weird kid. Um, you know, um, so I was a year and a half younger than most other students, and uh, everyone referred to me as a 10-year-old genius, which is probably what I looked like. But then somehow in 11th grade, Miriam Pepper, who was the editor and who I think went into journalism, uh, had me do some writing and uh, doing other things for the paper. The most famous thing that she did was a drug survey. I don't know if you heard about this in the
No.
lore of Clayton. No, the newspaper decided to survey all the students about who had taken marijuana and other drugs. And somehow I guess I'd taken computer math and I did some kind of cross tabulation of this. And Chris Condon, the local Channel 5 news reporter, came and interviewed several of us together because this drug survey was such a scandal, that a quarter of Clayton High School students had tried drugs. And so I had a brief moment on TV where they said Arnold Kling, survey programmer. And I just looked like awful. And I said some stupid thing. And that was my claim to fame junior year.
Had you been working on the paper before, or were you drafting it?
No, I think it was just the junior year.
Okay. What did you want to be when you grew up?
Other than a baseball player, I don't know. I think for a long time I didn't know what there was to do other than be an academic. I mean, I had my father who couldn't relate to anything else. Um, and so I just thought I would be one of these economists who I don't know when I settled on economics, but sort of this person who is either an academic or in Washington doing policy work.
You mentioned you might want to be a baseball player. When did you get interested in baseball?
Oh, very early. I remember, probably around when I was about 6 years old, hearing a Cardinal pitcher, Larry Jackson, saying, "I don't want to pitch in relief. I want to get out of my own jams." And I thought that was a memorable way of putting it.
Did you get interested in baseball through anyone else or on your own?
That was actually one of the few things that my father was interested in,
Hmm.
other than academic stuff. And so, yeah, we would go to baseball games, and I don't know, in those days in the 60s, the Cardinals were quite a team.
Yeah. Yeah, when I came to St. Louis for the first time in '63, they were in the pennant race down the stretch with the Dodgers. And
Yeah, no, we went to one of those late games where the Dodgers wiped them out. I remember Carl Sawatsky trying to save the team by hitting a home run, but that didn't do it.
that was Stan Musial's last year, so
Yeah.
I got to see him play before he retired. So where did you go to college?
I went to Swarthmore College. That was because our friend Tom Marcus just got tired of filling out college applications and said, "Well, here's one." And I don't think I was a great applicant at the time because my grades were not outstanding. Uh, but I got into Swarthmore because of the interview. I interviewed a local gentleman named Clayton Perry II, and I had gone to watch a state championship wrestling tournament in which his son had been beaten by this probably the best athlete at the whole tournament. And so I described that match. And then when I got to Swarthmore College, the dean of admission said, "Oh,
You never were a wrestler?
I did technically go for the Clayton High team for a bit, but I
Okay.
never won a match on the mat. There were a few times I could take forfeits.
What about the other schools you considered besides Swarthmore?
Well, I applied early decision to this innovative, very left-wing place. This was one of their first years called Hampshire College, but they deferred me. They even in April they said, "Well, we'll put you on the waiting list." And by that time, I was into Swarthmore. But I was rejected pretty much everywhere. Uh, Maybe I think Michigan might have accepted
Oh,
me.
all right. You might have come up here, huh?
Yeah.
What about Washington U? Did you consider that?
Oh no, that's local. No, that would be a sign of failure.
What did your dad want you to go there?
No, not
No?
particularly.
Okay.
At that point, f faculty got like half tuition paid for their kids, and tuition was a lot lower in those days in any case. So,
What did you study when you got to Swarthmore?
mostly economics. I had one great professor there. Who just had a wonderful manner to him. And a lot of people liked him, and a lot of his students went on to graduate school and to be well-known economists.
Did you know that you wanted to go into economics when you entered school?
No, I was kind of vague. You remember Mr. Queering, the wonderful
Hmm.
chemistry teacher? I told him that I was thinking of taking organic chemistry, and he goes, "Oh no." He'd seen me in AP chemistry, and I guess decided that laboratory science was not going to be my specialty. So he maybe helped steer me away from any kind of science.
Now, you went on to graduate school. Did you go immediately after
N-
graduating?
No, I spent a year. So my Swarthmore professor had some good connections in Washington. He was just very well networked in the profession. And the Congressional Budget Office had just been launched, and the first summer there, I had a job working there, and then uh, I was spending a lot of time trying to get a computer tape of a economic model that was maintained at the Federal Reserve, operating at Congressional Budget Office. So I was spending a lot of time with people at the Fed, and the Fed looked like a maybe a more fun place to be a research assistant. So I was a research assistant there for some time. And if you ever watch All the President's Men, and I think it's the opening scene where the security guard walks through a door in the Watergate building. Well, that's the door that I used to go to get to a place at the Fed. It was kind of an annex in the Watergate building.
So then when did you decide to go to grad school?
When I realized that in Washington that you couldn't really rise in the bureaucracy or whatever if you didn't have the PhD. So then I went to applied to MIT, went there, and Bill Sterling was at Harvard at the same time, and I think you probably connected us at that point.
How did you choose MIT?
It was had the best reputation, and so I'd applied for a National Science Foundation fellowship, and once you have that, you can go anywhere.
And you were you pleased with that choice?
I guess it was fine enough. I think, you know, I could probably have more directly had gotten to where I wanted to be by going to business school, but at the time it just didn't occur to me. I only knew academics. It didn't occur to me that business would be more enjoyable, actually more suitable to me.
And what was your graduate experience like? Did you fit in there? Did you like it?
No. To be quick. No, there was a lot of math involved, and I went in there thinking, oh, I'll have an advantage. I've worked with these computer models, and it said these kids had this very advanced math, and they were all ahead of me. And I just had this nagging feeling that they weren't doing economics right, and that feeling has only grown over time.
So you got your PhD there. Did you continue to work during that time, or did you leave your job?
No, no, I was no, I'd left the Fed, and
Okay.
yeah,
And then where did you go after you got your
the
degree?
Fed.
Back to the Fed?
Because in 1980 the economy was such that almost no academic departments were hiring. The ones that were hiring were in Texas, and my fiance at the time, who's now my wife, said, "Well, I'll write to you in Texas." So. Uh,
So was the Congressional Budget Office job your first full-time job, or did you consider that an internship? What was your
No,
situation?
it was a real job.
Yeah.
I did work in a local factory for a couple of summers. Gooping and padding, as it's called. They would spray, it was making metal speakers, and you would brush some black, ugly black tar stuff, and then put jute pads sticking to the tar so that the sound would be better coming out of these speakers. And spent 2 summers doing that.
So take us through your career after you got your degree and were working at the Fed again. Take
Okay.
us through what happened thereafter.
So I spent about 6 years at the Fed. I ended up going a lot of horizontal moves, no vertical moves. And finally, I should have left much earlier, but I left to work at Freddie Mac before it became famous. And that was going through an interesting period. It was a government agency when I joined, but it was over the next few years, it became private, which is sort of ironic because there's talk about doing the same thing to Freddie Mac now, which was a mistake then and be a mistake now. But that was very educational. I feel like I learned more there than in graduate school. You learn about how organizations work, and I mean you've encountered the all the issues there. There's what I call corporate soap opera, personality conflict. There's uh, chal challenges of getting people aligned doing this, doing the same. You learn that it's not, the in economics they'll teach you like the firm is almost like an atom. It just is very it's unified, it has a direct purpose, it's maximizing profits. And then from the inside, large organizations they're barely functional,
Right.
and there's a lot of internal conflict. And you don't know what your demand curve looks like, and all these things that are given in economics are not given in the real world. So that was a very educational experience.
All right. And then what did you do thereafter?
Okay, so uh, as part of corporate soap opera, it turns out that I'm almost compulsively creative, and organizations have very mixed feelings about that, to
Yeah.
say the least. And so, I would come up with an idea, push it uphill, make lots of enemies, and then if it got approved by senior management, I called that the next phase of the project is handing it over to the credit takers. And so I had was very humiliated, just as a project to use statistical credit scoring in place of human underwriters that I'd been pushing for a couple of years finally got started. I got summarily booted out of that. And at that time, I'd discovered sort of almost by accident the World Wide Web, and said, "All right, I'm I'm going to get involved in this. I'm confident enough that this is going to be important that if I quit my job and start a website, that I'll land on my feet somehow. And so this is April 1994. There were fewer than 1,000 websites total, and maybe a handful of commercial ones. And I started one of the first ones. Um, very there was another very educational experience and pretty much on the brink of failure, but it finally about a year and a half later, adults started finding the web, which was helpful to me since my site was about real estate and home building and relocation. Um, so finally, late 95, the web starts to take off. And so I said, all right, well, maybe I can actually stick with this. And then we eventually sold it in 1999 to this very sort of hyped up uh, web startup called Realtor.com. And if it hadn't been backed by the National Association of Realtors, it would have completely crashed. But they had one of these things where they went public. When they went public, they had enough money to buy us. And then you had the classic going stock price going way up and then crashing. It was a classic sort of pump and dump thing. And again, because they were from the National Association of Realtors, they didn't disappear entirely. Otherwise, they would have. But by that time, I was out and uh, went on to my next life, which was teaching and writing. I taught high school for 15 years as a volunteer, so I wouldn't have to do all the administrative work.
What did your wife think when you went off on your own?
Um, she took the view that I have intuition and that, it was okay. I was nervous because, you have three daughters and,
Mhm.
you know, so I was nervous about it. Um, but she saw that this was sort of my passion was trying to innovate and it was fun. It involved, you know, computer programming because in those days it wasn't so sophisticated. And it involved, sort of writing and sort of it was harrowing, but it really was stimulating, fulfilling, whatever. And
When
we were
did you
very
get
lucky in the
into
end to have this crazy realtor.com site buy us out.
when did you get into blogging?
Very early. So I read about blogging in 1999, and so I started my own blog called the Internet Bubble Monitor, which I can only keep up for about 6 or 7 months because then the bubble crashed. But I had all these, weird ratios, and I remember there was this music site. It was, Spotify too early would be the description of it, musicmaker.com. And I pointed out that their stock price relative to revenue, the revenue the past year had been $75,000. That's revenue, not profits. It's like total sales.
Yeah.
And so I was just mocking that. Uh, a former professor of mine somehow read my blog and after the crash credited me with seeing it, although lots of people saw that crash coming.
Yeah. Anybody blame you for the crash?
No, no, the crash, oddly enough, was started by this company called MicroStrategy, which had accounting problems, and when the accounting problems came out in March of 2020, that started the crash. MicroStrategy still exists today. The stock symbol is the same, MSTR, but they've changed their name to Strategy, and they are the biggest buyer of Bitcoin in the whole world. So if there's another crash, then they can be part of that one too.
Now you said the date, was it March of 2000? Is that what you meant?
20, yeah, 2000, not
Yeah.
2020.
Okay. So then you went on to do a lot of writing in various places and
Yeah.
vehicles and still are very active. So how did that come about, and do you still enjoy that?
Oh yeah, very much. I guess I've been blogging more or less continuously ever since. And somewhere along the line, somebody noticed. Uh, let's see. Well, I think as sort of personal therapy, I wanted to do a book on kind of the nature of the internet and what it meant economically. And uh, I looked for an agent, and the agent I wrote the book that my agent wanted, which was more about my personal experience and other people's experience on the internet. So that was the first book I did, and then uh, somebody spotted my blog and had me write uh, columns about twice a week for this site called Tech Central Station. I collected those in a book. And then somebody else noticed essays that I wrote on healthcare. And so a person at the Cato Institute recruited me to write a book on healthcare policy. And so things like that uh, proceeded. My favorite book, I think, I don't know, it's like saying your favorite child or something, but it's something that I co-wrote with a guy named Nick Schultz. And in the process, he interviewed 10 economists. So sort of I put in text and he put in these interviews. At the time, four of the 10 had won Nobel Prizes. Two more have since won Nobel Prizes, including one of them this year. So people are joking with me, economists should want to be interviewed by
Right,
you so they can
right.
get a Nobel Prize.
You could offer them to interview them for a fee.
Yeah.
What's a hobby or interest that you enjoy?
Well, there's one of them that's up there is Israeli dancing. I just came back from a weekend workshop, which got very little sleep at. Uh, that was something, it was odd. In college, my first girlfriend was very much into folk dancing, but I wouldn't do it. That's like, oh, what am I going to look like? I think it's a legitimate fear. There's this phrase, dance as if no one is watching. That's nonsense. Of course, people are watching. Uh, but you just have to put up with it. And I'm not a good dancer. Like from the waist up, I cannot dance. I have don't have the body control. I don't have the the elegance or anything. But my feet are quick and my balance is good, so that at least I don't trip over myself. And so I met my wife dancing. We still dance a ridiculous amount of time, like 3 nights a week, and we even go to a Zoom session, which you can think of that as a strange hobby to keep up on Zoom, but uh, during the pandemic, that's the serious dancers kept that up. The other thing is probably biking. I go for very long, very slow bike rides.
Or was the last place that you rode to?
Uh, well, I just ride in the area, so I'll ride from here to Annapolis, which is
Oh,
about 40 miles to the
yeah.
east, or Reston, which is about 30 or 40 miles west. So, you know,
Well, let's move on now to the Fave 5 topics. What do you like to read?
uh, I'd say when I reread books, I guess I tend to go to like things like uh, uh, the Winston Churchill biography or Tom Wolfe books or something like that. I read a lot of stuff on the internet now, um, and I think it's rare now for me to find an author who I really enjoy the writing style. Um, so I'm just kind of reading to process information as opposed to reading for pleasure.
And you seem to read a lot in terms of the things you write about. What's the amount of time you spend on reading, would you say?
Oh, I'd say 4 to 5 hours a day at least.
Mhm.
Yeah.
When you did enjoy a particular author, is there one that stands out? You mentioned Tom Wolfe. Was there any other authors that you really liked?
Um, Tom Wolfe and Tom Wolfe. Uh, some more of these are one-offs. There's a book called Radicals for Capitalism that just uh, sort of biographies of people but you see the foibles of people. It isn't just like, oh, so and so was great.
Yeah,
It's things like that. Also Neil Stevenson might be another. I don't know if you're familiar with him,
no.
science fiction writer. Uh, had a, you know, his books are way too long, but they have a real style to them.
All right, what about food? What do you like to eat?
Um, Ultra processed food, preferably with lots of seed oil. Uh, so yeah, it's yeah, I'm not very good about diet.
Do you have a favorite meal that you enjoy?
Oh, I don't know. Um, I guess when I go out to eat, I'll, go with Thai food or Indian food.
So if I came to visit you in Silver Spring, is there any particular place you'd take me if we went out to eat?
Well, there are a few places nearby. There's a place called Ruan Thai, which is very close to me, a couple miles.
I've
There's a
been there.
place. What?
I've
Yeah.
been there.
Yeah, okay. How was it?
Good.
Yeah, it varies. They have two chefs. One of them's good and one of them's
Oh,
not so great. And there's Gari Kebab which is Indian in downtown Silver Spring. And then there's Kebab and Kahari or whatever. Whatever. I forget how the last thing is, but it's out further in the suburbs. That's sort of a kebab place.
moving on to music. Do you have a favorite song or musician or album?
Well, the sad part is I think the Israeli dancing has kind of driven a lot of the music out of my system, but I think my all-time favorite was probably Clive Gregson and Christine Collister.
Hmm.
Briefly were together in the late 1980s. Uh, she was an outstanding singer and he
Yeah.
was a great songwriter, maybe my favorite songwriter of all time and a
Hmm.
great guitarist. I
And
also liked Indigo Girls back in the day, but you can see it's been a long time since I've been really
yeah.
into music.
And when we were in high school together, I know you were into music then.
Yeah.
You have any favorites at that time?
Went through several. There was a Doors phase for their first two albums before they became bubblegum. Uh, Jimi Hendrix, uh, the Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young,
What
Joni
was the first
Mitchell.
record that you bought?
Okay, so we went to Joe's Music in St. Louis, and I bought a single by the Animals called "It's My Life." I think that was it. Yeah.
What's the last concert that you went to?
Uh, the ones I remember were Indigo Girls right before they became big. I saw them at two small venues. My guess is I've heard something since, but I don't
Okay.
remember.
Now, you also had mentioned before that you had gone to a 10,000 Maniacs
Yes.
concert where Michael Stipe appeared. Is that right?
Yes, yes. That was when that was early for them. And he's sitting in the back of the audience, and then his part in the song comes up, and he goes running up on stage and sings his part and leaves. Yes,
You named your Substack after their album, right? In my
yeah. In
heart.
my tribe,
How
yes.
did you choose that title?
Well, a lot of my uh, discussion is about political tribalism. My best known book is called The Three Languages of Politics, and it's about political tribalism. And so that's where I came up with that.
What sports do you enjoy watching?
These days, I don't watch much.
Hmm.
I'm as likely to sort of watch a rerun of the 1970 Super Bowl or the 1964 World Series as anything currently going.
But you were quite a baseball fan. Did you like any other sports?
I liked football when the Kansas City Chiefs were really good in the late 60s and 70s. Of course, I mean the Chiefs are maybe good now, but I
Yeah.
have no idea what their record is now. I don't follow them. But for one thing, you could watch all their games on TV, and the football Cardinals were terrible. And also the Chiefs had this 5.5 foot guy who has a kickoff and punt returner, and as a short person myself, I felt like that was worth following. So I was a Chiefs fan in about the late 1960s, early 70s.
Yeah, if you were a Chiefs fan now, you'd have a pretty good team to root for. They've won several Super Bowls and
Yeah.
they're doing quite well.
Yeah, but I just yeah, I don't like the injuries in
Yeah.
football. My
Yeah.
my line is that they should have a maximum team weight limit of like 2,200 pounds, averaging 200 pounds a person, so that the collisions wouldn't be as violent.
Yeah. What's a favorite athlete you must have had some that you loved?
Yeah, well, obviously Bob Gibson was the classic, just a gutty, gritty guy, and he actually did not hit batters at the highest rate. Like people don't realize, like Jim Bunning hit more, and there were about 20 pitchers who hit batters at a higher rate. But that was his reputation. Sam Musial is a bit before my time, although everyone my age learned, to that weird stance of
Yeah.
his. Um, but Lou Brock was a favorite. You and I followed him in his 105 base stealing season. Um, and yeah.
I think you and I got to sit with his wife at a game once. Do you remember this? It was maybe through Gerald Early at Washington. You had a connection, and Gerald Early and your dad were connected. You remember that we got to sit in the Lou Brock box?
Boy, I'm not remembering that. I
Okay.
think I would, but
All right.
yeah, no, my father brought Gerald Early to St. Louis, and Early is still active. I think he has a new book out. Um, yeah.
Well, he knew Lou Brock, and that was how we got connected up, and we sat in that box. I think we got to say hello to him after the game.
Oh, okay.
Do you have a favorite sports memory?
Um, Well, when I was in elementary school, I played in the uh, JCC league and got written up because the coach's I think the coach's son was the pitcher, but he was having a bad day, so I relieved him, and I got written up as having struck out eight batters.
Wow.
But no, um, the I would say the 64 World Series ending was probably my favorite. Or oh, actually, the favorite has to be the Kansas City win in the Super Bowl in 1970, where they mic'd up the coach Hank Stram. So if you go on YouTube, you can hear Stram's totally random remarks like "Keep matriculating the ball down the field, boys." Just very, uh, they're running around like a child, like a Chinese fire drill out there. He's just anyway, that's probably my favorite memory because I wanted the American Football League to get its revenge uh, from the first two.
What's a favorite comedian or comedy that you have?
I'd say Brian Regan. Have you heard of him?
No.
Okay, well, look him up on YouTube. He's fun. Jim Gaffigan is more popular, but
Hmm.
he's another one.
How about a comedy film that you liked?
Oh, I'd probably go back to something like Take the Money and Run or
Yeah.
something like
Yeah.
that.
I think I must have seen Bananas with you when it came up.
Yeah, yeah.
And who's the best at making you laugh?
Um, Other than the comedians, probably my middle daughter, Joanna, has this very sly sense of humor. You sort of, after a couple minutes, you realize she's been totally mocking you. but it sometimes takes a while.
And who are you able to crack up?
Um, I have this neighbor who just I guess she laughs at everything. So
Okay,
it
that's a good audience.
doesn't take much work.
Good. All right, it's time for a story. Do you have a story that you can share with us?
A story that I can share. I didn't prepare a story. Um, I'll say that um, my next venture is I'm going to be in Austin, Texas, January through March, uh, teaching a couple classes for something called the University of Austin, which was started to be this anti-woke university. I think their goal is to be Harvard of 1960. So I call it the dead white males curriculum. Uh, but I'm going to be an oddball there. I'm going to be leaning into artificial intelligence. You and I had a discussion early after Chat GPT about this stuff, and I'm still excited about it. I created in 2 hours using one of these software tools a virtual wax museum of three economists where you can ask them questions and they can come back and give answers. And so I wanted to make sure that students would be able to do that. So I'm going to have students create a virtual wax museum using AI. So it's very different from the dead white males curriculum. So we'll see how I get along there.
And you also created a seminar. Tell us about that.
Okay, yeah, that was the first thing I tried to do. It's called the social code, and it kind of it's mostly on political psychology, which I'm also going to be teaching a course when I'm in Texas. And that I use Claude, who's very frustrating to work with. In fact, they've just fixed the main problem with Claude, which is that Claude had no short-term memory. I said it was like dealing with somebody with Alzheimer's. Um, you'd say something, and the next day it had completely forgotten it, completely forgotten where it was in the
Yeah.
project. Like, you say this into my project folder? I don't see it in my project folder. Okay. But anyway, so the professor in there is based on my Swarthmore professor. It has some of his mannerisms of going, well, I'm willing to be wrong, but uh, and um, so I have a professor. I have four students. They each have their own personality. Of course, these are all AI things, and there's scripts that you just read through, but then you can interact with them. You can say, "Call on me," and you can ask a question, and then all of them will respond. And it was a big project. I don't know. So I guess my junior year, I had this computer math class in high school, and I've been doing, ever since I've always wanted to do a big challenge. Every time there's a new computer thing, I want to make it big and challenging. So I wrote a program to do bridge bidding in high school. The problem with that was that, we were typing them into paper tape, and so I had this thick roll of paper tape and it broke. And at that point, it was unusable. So but I always try to for some reason I always challenge myself with big projects. So this sort of interactive seminar was a pretty challenging project. Took a month or two. Of course, it would have taken years if I'd had to code it myself. But that's a lot of fun learning how to work with these AI systems because they just throw out hundreds of lines of code in no time, and it completely changes the way you want to do software. You don't have to plan. The thing just says, "I want to do a prototype. I want to do a prototype." And you let it do a prototype where with a human, you wouldn't want them to waste 2 weeks doing a prototype and having misunderstood what you wanted. But here, fine. Okay, you misunderstood. Here's what I really want. It comes back, all right, I'll do another one. I'll do another one. So that's my latest little fling of being a 71-year-old vibe coder.
What kind of reaction have you gotten to that?
Uh, people are impressed by that. I don't think I've found anyone who wants to actually spend lots. Well, no, there are a couple of people who've spent a lot of time with it. It'll be interesting to see how my students react. I think there's something missing there. Um, it, it probably because it's all text-based. It's not, you don't get multimedia. That would be the next thing would be to actually have multimedia and see if that works. And maybe it doesn't. I mean, maybe education really needs live human beings together. It'll be interesting to see whether that happens. I think that's maybe the big issue in education in general going forward is can you really have remote learning? Is there a way to do that? So far, every attempt at that has failed. I mean, people thought television was going to revolutionize education. It was called educational television before it
Yeah.
was called VR. But nothing has come along to replace in-person education. And if you can't replace in-person education, then it's going to be stuck pretty much where it is now.
And you plan to use that in your course then, have the people participate in that seminar?
I'm gonna have them try that
Mhm.
and see what the reaction is. But again, I'm sort of skeptical that it will
Mhm.
work. I think there are other ways of using AI at this point, but maybe in a couple of years, that's what the that's what the technologists keep
Yeah,
saying.
yeah, right.
Next time for sure.
Well, I've been impressed by that. I've actually used that as an example when in my field of knowledge management, people are all excited about AI, but in a superficial way. And most of the use cases so far have been superficial. And I think that what you demonstrated there was you had to really invest some time and energy in working with it and interacting with it in order to get something useful, and not just, spend a couple of minutes asking some questions
Yeah.
of a chat.
No, if you just treat it as sort of a different version of Google, you're not doing much.
Right.
And there are many dimensions of trying to work on it. Yeah, I agree with you. Just you have to make an effort.
So I'm going to wrap up with a few stories of my own about us, going back to when we were seniors at high school together. I mentioned I was the statistician on the basketball team, but I also wanted to be the play-by-play announcer, and it was difficult to do both at once, but I enlisted your help, and so you would actually keep a lot of the stats during the
Yeah,
games.
I listened to your interview with Nick Adzik,
Yeah.
and he recalled something that I didn't recall at all from that Berkeley game, where I said something halfway intelligent. Because when I listened to that tape, I just cringed. What an idiot I was.
But you said if Adzik gets hot, it's over. That's the game. I think that's what you said. So that was prescient. And but anyway, you helped me out a lot because you could help me so I could get the stats that I needed to compile after the game because you took them for me during them. And then I could also do the play-by-play, but also you were there as a color man, so somehow you were doing both.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned writing elaborate computer programs. I had asked you to come up with a computer program to play a simulated basketball game between my two high schools. Do you remember this?
No, did I succeed?
You did not, but you worked at it for some time. I think it may have ended in the same way with a broken punch tape, but you worked on it for some time, and I was pretty excited about it. And I had written to my old coach back in Tenafly, who actually had been a math teacher, so it's kind of appealed to him. And he sent me the stats from that year, and I had the stats from Clayton because I was keeping them. And you were going to use those stats, and we were going to have a simulated basketball game. And
God, I could
anyway,
have
it
had a
sounded like a
career out
great
of
idea,
that.
but we didn't pull it off.
Wow, I could have made a career out of that.
You could have.
Gotten it right.
And then at some point during that senior year, I observed that you and some of the other classmates were playing bridge. I was not a bridge player. We used to play a lot of hearts, I remember when we got together. In fact, I think I must have played hooky from some of my classes at Clayton, and we were playing hearts all the time. One time, I think I got a call from my journalism teacher while we were playing, and he goes, "Are you planning to turn in your assignment?" In any case, but then at some point, I asked you to teach me how to play bridge, which you did. And then we actually got to be pretty good together as bridge partners. And you taught me the precision system, which was somewhat novel and somewhat involved compared to the traditional standard American bidding. And then there's just a single time where we got to play in a club tournament at the House of Bridge. And we were there playing the precision system. And I remember we did quite well. And one of the particular interactions, there was another partnership where you were supposed to give them your convention card to show what your conventions were, and that showed that we were playing precision. And that they were kind of looked at that, and one of them said, "Well, I don't want any alerts. No alerts. You can use that to communicate with each other." So we made some unnatural bid that they should have been alerted to that would have, and they didn't get the alert because they didn't want them, and we trounced them in that particular hand. So I thought that was kind of amusing. But anyway, I have to thank you for teaching me to play bridge. I still play to this day and really, really enjoy it.
Okay.
And then finally, last time we were together in Silver Spring, we were taking a walk, and I asked you about how you were doing your writing of in my tribe, and you said it was on Substack, and I was not a user of Substack at the time, but I began to think, well, what could I do on Substack? I was already writing a lot on other platforms for my field of knowledge management. I didn't think I needed to write anything more, but then I thought maybe I'll write about something else, not professional. And that's when I launched the Fave 5 newsletter on Substack, which I've continued to produce every week. So thank you for that.
Okay. The so are you still like active in your field? I know you go to conferences and so on. When are you gonna that people are asking me like when are you gonna quit?
So I actually retired from working. I worked for Deloitte up till 2016 and retired then. So that's 9 years ago. But since then, I've still been active in my field. So I write a fair amount and I still speak at conferences. I'm going to one in DC again next month called KM World. I was at one this year in Dublin, Ireland called Now It's Summit Dublin. I'm going back to that next year. So they keep asking me to speak at these events. I keep doing it. I still get interviewed a lot and appear on various events. And so I feel like I'll keep doing that as long as I have something to say and people are interested in reading it. Last week, I released my seventh book got published. So
Mhm.
I'll
Okay.
keep doing that. But so in one sense, I'm retired. In another sense, I'm still active
Yeah.
writing and speaking, and I lead a community of people in my profession. So I think I'll keep doing that as long as I'm
Okay.
able to.
So, well, if you ever want to be interviewed for your Fave 5 podcast, I would love to do that at some point.
Oh, great. Well, thank you, Arnold. I'll take you up on that. So if someone wants to follow you and in your various writings and endeavors, how do they find you?
Probably just look for Arnold Kling Substack is probably the best. I have a web page that's arnoldkling.com. So if they wanted to read various weird biographical information and just see how what a ridiculous amount of writing I've done over the last 20 years, they can go to that.
Um, when you write your uh, in my tribe post, do you do that on a routine? Do you write every day or do you write a batch? How do you go about that?
I definitely read every day. I tend to write more in batches and they're always scheduled. It's a couple advantages of that is one is it I'm deterred from talking about the current thing. Uh, which is I think uh, that's healthy to not be into whatever the latest 2 days news is. And the other is I'll typically look at a post a few times before it actually goes up, and that can, correct it, edit it, and tone it down usually.
So final thing story I wanted to tell was the time you visited us when we were up in northern Michigan.
Mhm.
And being in Michigan, we play a game called euchre that you had not previously played, and I offered to teach you how to play euchre. So you said we must have spent a very short time, not just a matter of minutes, teaching you the game. And you said, "Okay, I think I got it, ready to play." And so in euchre, there's a concept called going alone, which means that if you are able to take all 5 tricks by yourself without your partner, you get 4 points, which is the highest. So at any rate, most people don't figure that out for a while after they start playing euchre. But we played in the first hand, you said you're going alone and and you made it. I thought that's a pretty quick study.
Well, that's a pretty, must have had a very good hand, I would say.
I
That's all I
assume you
can
haven't
say.
played a lot of euchre since then.
No, I have not. I have to say I have not. They, yeah, no, I think I gave up my card playing type stuff in grad school because there was just so much sitting down doing problem sets, and that's when I switched to dancing as my hobby.
If you ever want to take bridge up again, I'm glad to play with you online.
Yeah, that might be whenever my knees give out.
Okay, I'm there for you.
Okay, sounds good.
Thanks a lot, Arnold, for joining me today. Enjoyed our conversation, and I admire all that you've done and continue to do, and appreciate your time today.
Okay, thank you, Stan.